A little bit about Reggie. you know, I've been like, what am I gonna say about Reggie? I know a lot of people have heard that his brothers, right? Ralph and Ronnie. Well, but for me, I got sober with all of them. And even though I know that they are come from the same family, similar stories, in recovery together, I have seen each of them in their journey of recovery, and each one individually, in their own uniqueness, have contributed to my sobriety. Not as a group, not as a group of brothers, but as alcoholics. I just wanted to say that. And to me, when I have seen Reggie, I've seen him as Reggie, and I have learned so much from his journey. He is a great part of my recovery. I've watched his enthusiasm, I've watched him leave us, and I've watched him come back. I've learned from both. He is so instrumental. And now I have seen him just be on fire. He's our town crier, whatever you want to call it. He jumped in and he was like, it gave him this purpose of contributing his own way to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm just so excited for him. I'm just in awe of watching God's grace and that I could be a witness to what God is doing in his life. And the fact that I get to benefit from that is like the bonus. So I know he's nervous and I'm nervous for him too. Just because he's nervous. But I know he's gonna knock it out of the park, man, because I love his relationship with God today. And I'm so excited for all of you guys to hear it. So everybody, please welcome, no pressure, Reggie. Come on up.
Thank you, Teresa. My name is Reggie White, and I'm an alcoholic. God, I love Teresa. That's my girl. Love her to death. And I love Ali, too. You know, thank you, Ali, for asking me to come out. I've been cursing you so many weeks now for asking me. But now that it's here, I want to thank you. And that's due to your sponsor, too. You know, it's funny how these ripple effects happen in Alcoholics Anonymous and how God works. And it's a trip to me to sit back and just do what I'm supposed to do and watch how God works. Because I was so nervous at the thought of coming here because so many people who have been so influential in my sobriety have spoken at this meeting. And I'm thinking, what in the world can I possibly contribute? And then Butch, I'm watching Butch. A couple of weeks ago, he spoke at a meeting in Canada. I love Canada. And Butch said, you know, I go to these meetings, they ask me to speak and I'm going to go and I'm going to speak. But then I worry about whether or not I'm going to sound good and worry about how I'm going to look at these meetings. And then I remember that it's not about me. It's about God. It's about God's will. It's about God and through me and me reaching out to somebody in that meeting. God reaching out to somebody through me in that meeting. And I thought to myself, but you're right. You know, because it's not about me sounding bad. It's not about me looking bad, but it's about God reaching out through me. And maybe Jules, maybe you can hear something here today. Teresa and Ali, you weren't here, but our friend Jules, who was working on, well, he's not even quite working on a day, but Jules, hopefully you'll hear something here today that can help you make it to it. Maybe get a day, maybe just get a day. And I think about spiritual maintenance, right? Because that's what, when I see this step, and somehow what popped to my mind is when I was in college, I had a yellow, my very first car that I ever bought for myself. Well, the very first car I ever had, period, that I bought, and it was a Mazda, and it was one of those Mazda with the rotary engine where you had to make sure it had oil in it, right? That maintenance. And see, and I let my cousin take the car up to our college that we went to Redlands and bring it back. And I didn't say anything to him. You know, I didn't care. But when he took it up there, he didn't do the maintenance. He didn't add oil. He didn't check the oil when he went. He didn't check the oil before he came back. He ran out of oil. And when a Mazda overheats, the engine blows. And on his way back, the engine blew. And he was there by the side of the road calling me, telling me, man, your car is gone. You know, you need an engine, which basically meant that car was over with. Kind of like what happened to me. You know, without that spiritual maintenance, You know, and let me get to how that spiritual maintenance was. Because see, I'm not the guy who's coming with educational variety, guys. What I come with is this, is my personal experience. And in my personal experience, I got to you as a very high bottom drunk. You know, I came here following two of my brothers basically because I wasn't ready to come in here. I was ready. What I was trying to do was find a way, a place to stop and regroup for a couple of minutes, right? To get it back together because I've always been a high achiever. I've always been a guy that can work my way out of things. I can always get another job. I can always get another place. I can always get another girl. I can always get another everything. But at this point, I ran into trouble, right? And I run into my brother Ronald, and he had told me he had planted that seed about Alcoholics Anonymous. He had caught me at a, actually, he caught me at a period when I was doing okay, but he was doing better. He and Ralph had disappeared. And Ronald told me, yeah, we went to this place called Salvation Army Harbor Light Center. That was in February. Well, that was in December of 1986 when Ronald told me that. By that time, he had maybe 6 months, 5 or 6 months, about 6 months. Ralph maybe had a couple of months, and they had disappeared. And I didn't know where they were, and they told me about that. And I looked at him, and I thought about the fact. I looked at him, and I thought about. I mean, he was clean too, clean, smelled good, looked good, and he hadn't been clean and smelled good and looked good in a long time. You know, a long time. And I looked at him when he told me. He said, "And if you ever," he told me that's where he was, and he said, "And if you ever want to stop doing what you're doing, if you ever want to quit, I can get you in there too." And I looked at him and I thought, you scandalous. You need that place. I don't need, you know, and I asked to borrow money. He said, no, I cursed it to myself and kept it pushing. Seed was planted. And so when I went, when that car, I had this woman's car in February of 1987, and I was scared to take this car back, right? Now, I'm a high bottom drunk. I'm just running into a little bit of a hard time, right? Temporary situation. But I called Ralph because I couldn't reach Ronald. So I called Ralph and I said, can you take this car back for me? Because, you know, I'm a coward, right? I didn't have a girl's money, didn't have, you know, and I didn't want to go back with just the car. And Ralph said, sure, I'll take it back. And that was on a Friday. And he said, but you got to go into this Harbor Light place. I'm like, well, okay, because, you know, he going to take the car. I'll tell him yes to anything. I said, I'll go in there on Monday because I have stuff, business I have to take care of, my affairs I have to get in order. And he said, no, the only way I'll take this car back is if you go in there right now. And that was the best move of my life up to that point. I walked into the Salvation Army Harbor Light Center on February 7th, 1987. Not more dead than alive, but I was tired, man. I hadn't slept. I had people after me. I had things going on. I had hit a rough patch. But when I got in there, I was able to listen just a little bit. And they took me to this place called Alcoholics Anonymous. And when they took me to AA, I didn't take on to it immediately, not in that rehab, but then I went to a place called 9604 South Figueroa after I had about 30, 45 days in that place. And I went to 9604. I took a buddy with me, and that's where I experienced real Alcoholics Anonymous. And I fell in love with you guys. I fell in love with you immediately because when I sat in there, see, people hadn't been nice to me for a long time. I hadn't talked to women without having money out in a long time. You know, everything was transactional. Everything was, what can you do for me or what can I do for you? And when I walked in there and I sat down and I looked over to my left and I saw that coffee pot, and that coffee pot looked so good, and they had some cookies over there, and we were sitting on the back row, me and the two guys I brought with me, and we were nervous, and we looked over there, and we didn't have any money. We didn't have any money. And I wanted that coffee so bad, and I wanted a cookie so bad. And the woman, one of the old timers, looked at me and she read my mind, and she said, don't worry, baby. Go over there and get you some coffee. Go over there and get you some cookies. It don't cost you anything. It's free. You can have that. Get up and go get you some. And I got up and got that. And got that. And I fell in love with Alcoholics Anonymous because of the kindness. That kindness that we reach out and extend each other. I fell in love immediately. And that was the first place I saw God in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I didn't even know. I didn't even know. And from that point, from February, we started the Sunday Never Too Early Big Book Workshop in in November of 1987. And my other little brother came in the program in December of 1987. So now we got 4 boys in the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, and we're working these steps. And I've in the meantime, I've been going on panels to prisons, and I'm taking my panel down to Skid Row, and I'm sponsoring someone very poorly. I'm being sponsored very well, and I'm doing everything that you guys asked me to do in this fellowship. And I'm immersed in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm loving every second of it, every second, especially working the steps. I remember we were working these steps, and the very first time because we would hold each other accountable. It was like 12 of us in my mother's dining room, and we're around the table and stuff, and we're going through the steps like Joe and Charlie showed us, right? And actually doing this thing. And we did that 4th step where I actually felt like I was a part of it. I actually felt like I was a part of this fellowship when I finished the 4th step and did a 5th step. I remember Ronnie did the 5th step before, and I'm talking about my brothers a lot because they're a big part of my sobriety. You know, they don't even know about the stuff that I'm saying most of this time because I'm just watching them. And I always remember, I keep that in my mind that people are watching me all the time. And sometimes I'm the only big book that somebody sees, and I have that responsibility. And I remember when Ronald, he did the 5th step first. We all would report back on what we did. And I remember he finished first because we all looked at him, and all of a sudden we were calling him Mr. Serene or Saint Serene or something, because he looked real peaceful and serene all of a sudden after this. And I was thinking, I want that feeling. And I remember when I did my 5th step, I didn't feel that way. And I felt like I was cheated a little bit, but I did still feel like I was part of this fellowship because I had done some of this work. And then we got to, and let's see, here's the dirty little secret. Yes, I was a high bottom drunk. Yes, I had some bit of desperation. But by that time, life had got real good to me. See, success came to me earlier than almost anybody I knew in Alcoholics Anonymous because I hadn't gone that far down and I had a lot left, contacts, all this stuff. I immediately got an excellent job. And then by the time we got to this 5th step, when I had a year of sobriety, I had a great job. Now the guy is hiring me to go to fly to Atlanta, back and forth to Atlanta, bringing a company back. And I'm making 6 figures. And I'm running 6 departments, and I have 250 employees. And so now I'm not doing as much as I was. And I remember we got to but that's not even an excuse. I do remember they said do 6 and 7, right? But they said go away and do it by yourself. I didn't do anything because that desperation was off me a little bit. And see, I did the work part. I did the tough part. I didn't do 6 and 7. Now, I did a real good list on 8, right? Did a real good list. Step 9, I probably did a couple of amends, but I don't even remember them, which means if they weren't that memorable, because life was taking off, right? And now I'm doing that so-called living amends, without actually coming up and doing one, right? So I'm doing that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 program, and now I'm looking at 10 and 11, and man, I'm thinking about what am I now? 10, I would admit stuff, right? I knew to kind of not mess up and not take responsibility. I could do that part of it. But man, I wasn't burning any incense and doing that meditation stuff. I wasn't doing all that. See, that's what I thought of meditation. Seriously, back then, see, because life has showed up, and I was doing much better, and I was well. Now, I wasn't putting down alcohol. I was very much. This was all looking back in the rearview mirror. I didn't realize I was doing this at the time, but here I am. They're talking about doing this 11th step. And, I'm thinking this meditation stuff, man. I'm not sitting cross-legged and doing, and now burning incense and listening to some crazy music or and all that stuff. That's what I saw as meditation. And quite frankly, see, here's the other dirty little secret. I was still embarrassed by prayer. I was still embarrassed by prayer. See, I would pray some. I would occasionally get on my knees and pray, but I would normally do, I'd say, oh, I just talk to God. Just talk to God. And I did. I talked to God when I needed to, when I wanted to, when things were bad, when things were good, I just rolled away, right? But I talked to God when things got bad, and I did a hell of a step 12. I did all that. Carrying the message. I listened to you, I run my mouth, and actually I cared about people, so I did do step 12, but I didn't do the maintenance steps. And when my car got caught on the road without oil in it, when my little girl got sick, because see, I got the family and everything else too, right? I got all the stuff I wanted. Great job, great family, great everything. Life was really good for me, man. Life was really good for me. But when my little girl got sick, when she had those 4 months where she was all that pain and all that agony, and now I'm praying, right? Now I'm praying. But see, there's no meditation. But now, see, I never did do step 11 that first time around. But now I'm praying, right? I'm praying to God. I'm rubbing the genie, you know? In other words, I'm praying and asking him to do stuff for me, even though I thought it was selfless. See, and that's where when I don't pray and meditate on a regular basis, I get out of whack. And I don't even really, I'm not praying and meditating and keeping that channel open. I'm not putting the oil in the car. I'm not putting the oil in the car. So now when my little girl got sick like that, and I'm praying hard as I could, and then when we moved her to the other hospital and we're praying hard, and I say, okay, let me bring in the big guns. And we bring in the church people. We bring in moms and all the church people because we were raised in a church, right? And when those times got hard, my mom would put us in prayer circles. I hated prayer, man. I hated that. Putting us in these prayer circles, I was embarrassed. They're praying for me. Oh, please let Reggie. All I could do, I couldn't wait to get out of that circle so I could go have a drink, go have one. I couldn't wait. But when the times got tough, be quick to see where religious people are right, and I call them in, and they bring in all the church, all of AA coming in. My little girl was in that hospital for 3.5 weeks. She was intubated and she was unconscious. And people came in shifts and read a book to my little, I think it was The Hobbit, if I'm not mistaken. And they had it bookmarked, and people would come in and pick up where the next person left off so that my little girl could always hear a voice. Always hear a voice. And you guys, man, AA showed up and the church people showed up. And see, I always tend to look at where the AA people are, and I've always looked at the church people who are critical and the AA people not see, because I've been quick to see where church people, religious people are wrong. And I remember there are a couple of things I don't know if I ever talked about. I remember when my little girl got intubated, the light went out in her eyes, right? And because I made it back to the hospital. We dropped her off. I went to work. They called me and said, come back right now. I made it back just in time, and she waited for me and reached out, and I saw the light go out in her eyes, right? When I reached for her, when she reached for me. And I went to the phone and called my mom, and I'm crying. And because I knew I'd never see her look at me again. And she told me, don't stop crying, man up. And I hated my mother. I hung up the phone on her. And then she showed up and she did everything. She was there every day, all the time. And I asked her to pray for my little girl. And she said a prayer now that I hated then, but that I tell everybody all the time. Just pray for God's will. I'm just praying for the strength that we all can make it through this. Pray for God's will and for us to have the strength to make it through it. thinking to myself, why aren't you praying for my little girl's life? And I'm looking at how church people are wrong. I'm looking at how religious people are wrong. Why won't you guys do what I want you to do? Just like I'm mad at God. Why won't God do what I want you to do? And um, then when she died, and I kind of felt like it's partly my fault because everybody believed except me because I knew she was dead already. And I've carried that, but I've always it's something about, I don't know, that whole religious connection. Just it's so tough with me, man. It's just so tough with me. But anyway, and most people on here, a lot of people on here know that I hated God since from that point. I didn't go back to work. I didn't go back to AA. I couldn't hear my sponsor, couldn't talk to sponsees, didn't go to a meeting, couldn't hear my brothers, couldn't hear you in Alcoholics Anonymous, couldn't hear anybody or anything. All I had was anger. And I wrapped that anger around me like I like to tell because it's so true, like a warm blanket on a cold day. I just wrapped it around me and I went through life like that. And I didn't drink then, but 11 months later I did because no maintenance and the car was stuck. The car was already gone. I just hadn't gone to put it in bed. I hadn't gone to tow it away yet. That's all. No spiritual maintenance. See, and I realized looking back, it talks about the 11th step is really, really precise because I remember, like I talk to sometimes sponsees who talk about, well, we could do the 11th step now, like they're before the 4th step and all that. I want to pray and meditate. And I'm telling them, sure, always pray and meditate, but it's not the 11th step. Don't get it confused, but please pray and meditate. Step 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. See, because we're praying to improve something. See, my spiritual connection comes through the 9th step. That's when, for me, things really started working. But I had never had the spiritual connection. I was still, I did all that good work in the 4th and 5th step, but I never developed that spiritual connection. It was nothing to maintain and improve on, and I didn't work to maintain and improve it anyway. And so when I drank, it should have been no surprise to anybody, but it was certainly a surprise to me. And when I drank it 11 months, I drank for 2 weeks, then did something else for 2 weeks, and on the anniversary of my little girl's death, I killed myself. I took a bunch of pills and was pronounced dead, but they brought me back. Because God wasn't ready for me, and I'm really pissed at religious people the whole time, because what kind of God would do something like that? And what kind of God did you bring me up on? And what kind of God would let a little girl suffer the way he let her suffer? And I just couldn't get that. I believed in him. I cursed him all the time. I talked to him all the time. But my God, I hated that guy. And why? What do you hear? But why? If that's the best you can do, God, why? And I'm questioning. And it took me 16 years. It took 16 long, hard. See, 16 years sound like just a couple of words here, but years, man. And I went from a high bottom to a low bottom in those 16 years. I went to an extremely low bottom because partway through it, I developed glaucoma. So now I have 0% vision in my right eye and 30% in my left. That's how I'm stuck for the rest of my life. If God willing, I'll still have 30% in my left eye. And that's all I could see. And at that time, I was cursing God harder because now I can't work for anybody. Because, see, I was still being a functional addict. Maybe God had work for me to do. And he's like, man, you need to speed this up. We need to take you to the bottom just a little bit faster or before you die out there. And I cursed him hard, man. And then eventually, we talk about God doesn't let misery be, he doesn't make misery comfortable. But before that, I remember I thought of some things. I remember while I was out there trying to get back here, I remember there was some mornings, because the Sunday Never Too Early Big Book Workshop is every Sunday morning. And that's been going on since November of 1987. It seemed like that's all I thought about. Let me get back to the Big Book Workshop. But my pride and my integrity and my pride and I was so ashamed and all that. I wanted to at least get a year before I made it back. And so I'm trying to sneak back. But I remember there were times I'd be behind my mother's garage and I'd be sitting there on Sunday morning and I'd think, because the garage would go up every Sunday morning at 5:30 in the morning. And I think to myself, Ronnie's about to open up the doors. It's Sunday Never Too Early. Because my brother Ronald, every Sunday for like 20 years, he's there opening the doors and bringing in all the fruit and stuff. And, like always. And then there's a guy who comes in and sets up the chairs and stuff. And there's a woman who comes in slicing the fruit. But he did that all the time. And I would give him credit for that. And I wouldn't be quick to see where religious people were right, because that garage going up at 5:30 in the morning every Sunday was my mother. And my mother would be getting in her car to go to church. Why would she go there if I get up at 5:30 in the morning and go to church? Because they would get in the kitchen and they would cook breakfast for the people in the Nickerson Garden. That's a project in Los Angeles, a really tough project, and all the people from the projects would come over to the church and eat breakfast every Sunday morning, because all of those people were there, the same people that I thought were so hypocritical. And I looked at them as being on this little spiritual plane, and not realistic and not helping people. And I just overlooked that. All the time. And she did that probably those same 20 years that Ronald was doing the workshop stuff. At the exact same time, she's getting up and she's going to that church, cooking hash browns and pancakes, whatever they're cooking for. I mean, they're really laying it out just for the kids and the people, the poor folks in Nickerson Gardens, so they can have one good meal a week, one good breakfast, and eventually it got tired. Well, eventually the girl stole my mother's car. That's what happened. There's nothing. I mean, I kept trying to get back. By taking myself through the book. See, I kept doing the same way that I did the first time. I said, though you be but one man with this book in your hand, we believe and we hope it contains all you need to begin. That's the way I lie to myself and make myself my sponsor and take myself through the steps. And then I find somebody and I go 1 through 4, do a hell of a 5th step with somebody. And then I skip to 12 and 13, just like before. But then I got desperate. And because I was a low power, man, it got real bad. It got to the point where, because I couldn't work for anybody now, I'm walking the streets. I'm doing that walk all the time, that aimless walk. And the only income I had was general relief. That's just public assistance. That's just $200-something a month, right? Not enough to live. And I would supplement that by going and selling plasma twice a week. See, I'm the guy who always had great jobs. I'm the guy who had 6 departments and 250 employees. I'm the guy that they're flying coast to coast to bring businesses back and forth. And I'm selling plasma. And I'm walking with my head down because I'm so ashamed that I can't look any of you in the eye because I'm afraid of what's looking back at me. And I gave up. I surrendered. I surrendered right there behind that garage, while it seemed like I'd always be back there hiding and drinking and hoping nobody come back there and see me. And listening to my mother raise that garage every Sunday morning at 5:30 and go out and feed those people, and wishing every Sunday morning I was at the Big Book Workshop. And then I gave up on that, and I realized that God was not going to let me die. I was not going to be able to recover, that I was doomed every single day to have absolutely no goals, no dreams, no hopes, no life. And I didn't even know, and I just couldn't die. He wouldn't let me die. I didn't realize he was carrying me for 16 years, bringing me back to you guys, carrying me to like I could get back. But that girl stole that car, and when she stole that car, my niece, or rather my baby brother, the one who came in December behind me, he has 30 something years now too. He came in that room that I was renting from my mom, and he said the car, mom's car is gone. And he told, and my mother was standing behind him, terrified. And the woman I love more than anybody else left on the face of this earth is terrified of me. And I was, and it hurt me. So it tore my heart out. I didn't even know I had a heart left, and it tore it out. And I made one right decision. And that right decision was I'm going to go back to that same rehab that I've been to 2 times in a 5-year period. Jules, whatever you do, go in there, just go tomorrow. Go tomorrow. You know, I made that one right decision, and God was able to step in with just a little bit of grace, just a little bit. And when I got to that rehab, my sponsor was there, and I'm walking with my head down, like I always do, like I always did, walking with my head down. And he walked right up on me because I didn't see him. When I say head down, I mean head down. And he told me to pick my head up. He told me that I was a child of God, that I didn't have the right to walk with my head down anymore. He said that God would not have put me through all the things he put me through 16 years without there being something really special that I'm supposed to do. He told me that I had a responsibility to come back and help other people. And I looked at him and I told him, I said, Rico, I can't do it. And I don't have another recovery in me. I said, this has to be it. I said, I need you to help me. I need you to take me through these steps. I asked somebody else for help. I finally surrendered and asked someone for help. And he told me no. He told me no. He wouldn't take me through the steps. He said, I'll go through them with you every step of the way. Man, I've been blessed so many times. See, all this is about is a journey back to God. Because, see, I hated God. I was still hating God. I didn't know how I could get back. And it took so many of you guys, so many. I got to talk faster. There's so much going on. God, it was hard to get back. We went through those steps, and we went through them in order, and we went through them thoroughly. And he was trying hard to keep up with me. I'm telling you. He would ask me where I was, and I'd tell him, he'd say, I better hurry up and write some more. I better hurry up and do some more, because I had nothing. I had that gift of desperation. And I'm under God's grace, and I know that grace is not forever. And I'm working as all I could think about is that I have a chance, but I still can't get back to God. I still can't figure out how to get back to God. And I'm back now at the Never Too Early Big Book Workshop. And we're on the 4th step. By the time we're on the 4th step, and because I'm writing it in there, but I'm back now. And we come in right on the 4th step. And God is good. There was so many things. So many things had to happen right. That's right. And we were at the 4th step. And I'm trying to work my way through it. Because I got on my knees and did that 3rd step with everybody else. But man, still didn't trust God. I'm still so mad at God. I'm still so angry at God. But see, all I had to have was a willingness. Just a willingness, Jules. Just a willingness to believe. I didn't have to believe. And my brother Ralph came up with something. In the Sunday Never Too Early workshop, when you have that unjustified resentment, unjustified anger, that unjustified, the thing where you did nothing wrong. I can't look and say where I see where I had any part in this. I can't look and see where I had any mistake in this. Maybe I got kidnapped, or maybe you were raped as a child. Maybe you were raped as an adult. Maybe you were abused. Maybe your kid gets killed, and you just can't see your way around to forgiving somebody. And what he said and what we do in that big book works out is we say, do you want to be right or do you want to be free? Do you want to be right or do you want to be free? And I chose freedom. I put God on the fourth step. And when I put God on that fourth step, things started looking differently. I started to look at the world differently. Because, see, I looked at it and I said, well, God didn't give my little girl that bad medicine. The doctor at the children's hospital. God didn't kill my little girl. The doctors at Cedar Sinai made that decision. I looked at the fact that God, I begged him to take my life, not hers. When did God start working for me instead of me working for him? And then I looked at the fact of my eyesight, that I'm blind and I can't work for anybody and I can't make a living. But he left me with 30% vision. I see all of you guys. I can read books like I do. And I've been doing taxes for 40 years. I can do taxes with 30% vision as well or better than anybody in the world. And it turns out when you're not drinking and using, you actually are able to really build a practice and really make a living. And I have way more business than I can possibly handle, you know, and that's all due to you guys, all due to this journey back to God. And what's more, the bigger parts are I had to put God on that ninth step, you know, because it's either amends or forgiveness. And in this case, I had to make an amends to God because he carried me, and I also had to forgive God, you know. And when I started doing all those amends, I did them to all my brothers. I did it to my ex-wife. I did it with my mom, and it was some hard amends. I did other amends where it was money and stuff, but the ones when they're personal, those are the hardest ones to me. That's the ones where I'm going in and I have to relive all the things that I did for 16 years. And when I went through those, that's when I developed a real conscious contact with God. Every amends I did, because I built that plank on the eighth step. I built it with all the amends I wrote down, and then I walked that plank. And I had to make that leap of faith over and over and over and over again. And when I made those leaps, things started happening in my life. And things started to pick up in my life. And I said, I got to go through all these though. And as great as those amends were, I knew I had to do the maintenance this time. And so I did that 10th step. And I do the 10th step. That's probably the poorest step that I do right now. But I tell you one of the better steps that I do, and that's step 11. I maintain that conscious contact with God as we understand Him. What I do is through the prayer and meditation. And see, I've learned some things. I talk to people. I open my mouth. And then I came to this workshop. Thank you, Risa. Thank you, Ali. Polly Pistol. I heard Ralph share about that last week at this meeting, and that was the same thing that hit me when Polly came here and she did a practical thing on it. And I started doing my prayer because my sponsor told me just meditate. It doesn't matter if you do 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever you do, but do it consistently. You know, and I started to do that, but then it got more honed and more developed, and I do that meditation and I write my gratitude, I write my to-do list, I write my gratitude list, and at night I look and see how well I did, and it's so simple. But what I do in that is I found that I take me out because I do that prayer every time before. I don't do a whole bunch of reading and a whole bunch of praying, but I just go back to a vision for you. Ask him in your morning meditation what you can do each day for the man who's still sick. And see, I keep it real simple. I keep it real simple for me, for a guy like me, because I don't worry about me. Man, look at all the stuff that's happened to me since I don't worry about me. I'm a guy who went from being a cautionary tale, and I'm still a cautionary tale, and I'm telling you guys, do the maintenance, but I'm also a guy who's a tale of redemption. I came back in this fellowship and see my brother Ronald stepped up for me. Things immediately happened for me. The day I went back to that big book workshop, the very first day I walked in there, he just told a guy. He told a guy who's standing in there, Reggie can't drive. He's legally blind. Can you take him to a couple of meetings at night? Just a couple of meetings. And my friend Angel, that guy, he asked me if I wanted to go to a meeting that night. I said yes. And he asked me the next night. I said yes. And he asked me for 2 straight years. And I said yes every single night. And then that's when he told me. He said, you know, your brother Ronald asked me to take you to a couple of meetings that day you came back. And that's why I asked you. He said, I never thought you'd go more than a week. And he thanked me. Thanked me for rebuilding his program, for getting back in touch with his program. Man, that's what God does for us. God does for me what I can't do for myself, what I'm doing for someone else. And that's me what the whole 11 step is about. I'll tell you about what God's will for me looks like when I'm not in God's will and when I am in God's will. One of the times during that period, I told you I went to that same program, rehab, 3 times in a 5-year period. One of those times, I had actually made it up to a year. And God's will told me that I thought that God's will for me was to go to this prison and visit this ex-girlfriend of mine, same one that stole the car, right? Keep visiting her and help bring her back to sobriety, right? I thought that was God's will for me. See, that's what happens when I don't pray and meditate. So I'm sneaking off. I told a couple of guys, but I didn't tell my sponsor, and certainly didn't tell anybody that, they looked at me and we all laughed at each other. I said, I got a plan. And we all laughed together because we knew where it was going. And that's me thinking I'm doing God's will. As opposed to me meditating and praying and asking God to direct my thinking and asking God just simply, for me, I don't know how anybody else has to do this, but for me, what can I do each day for the man who's still sick? What can I do? And see, when that comes up, Jules, that's why you have 2 guys who are ready to take you to the hospital tomorrow. They're ready to bring you a bottle of vodka and let you drink and take you with your gout-filled foot up in that hospital. That's Alcoholics Anonymous. That's why that guy put me in his car for 2 straight years and even more and took me to all these meetings. That's Alcoholics Anonymous. God, I don't know how much more time I have, but I think I'm done talking, and here's all I've got to say at the end. I got a couple of things to say, because due to Alcoholics Anonymous, due to this 11th step, I was able to get that contact back with my mom. My mom is now 91 years old. She just celebrated her 91st birthday on February 1st. And see, my mother, all those years, like I said, a mother is only as happy as her most unhappy child. And what she did for me is she always tried to keep me under her garage roof or under her roof, let me pay rent. I'm paying rent now in her house, but they don't give up on you. A mother is only as happy as her most unhappy child. She wouldn't give up on me. But every time I would see her, especially when she talked, it seemed like with Ronald and Ralph, especially, would be so cheerful. Hey, Ronald, hey, Ralph, hey, Ronnie, hey, just cheerful. And with me, she would just look and shake her head, or hey, Reggie, and about a month ago, she looked at me. I walked in her door and she said, hey, Reggie. She was so excited. And I looked at her and started laughing. She asked me why I laughed. I said to her, Mom, I waited 16 years for that. I said, I waited 16 years to hear you say, hey, Reggie, like that. That's due to you guys. That's due to God. That's due to a conscious contact with God and with all of the help, all of the spiritual help of all of you at Alcoholics Anonymous. And one more quick thing. And then my little niece, because I don't think I'm hurting anybody. I never think I'm hurting anybody. I'm going away. And for all of our new friends, when we think we walking back in and we didn't hurt anybody and all that, well, for me, this is how it looked. That niece is the same one. My mother told me a couple of months ago, you owe your niece an amends. My mother is too much into this program. She said, you owe your niece an amends. And I'm like, what did I do? She said, your niece got the car out of impound after that girl stole it. Ah, the best day of my life when that girl stole that car, June 24th, 2017, where I've never, ever had another thought of a drink since then. Yeah, that was the best day of my life. I didn't know it at the time. So yes, I got to pay that amends. And I called my niece and I told her I wanted to make amends and I offered her that money. And of course she said no. And I told her that if I didn't pay her that money, I might drink or use it. She quickly took the money. Um, and I asked her that question. Is there any other way that I've harmed you? Anything else I've done? And she said, yes. She said, Uncle, you always put all of us, you put me and my sisters and everybody, all the kids on your knee every Christmas, every Thanksgiving. And you told these crazy stories, you and Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny and the Tooth Fairy. And you told all these stories and you had us laughing and you always told me you loved me. And I always wanted you to do that with my kids. She said, I always wanted you to do that with my kids and you weren't here. And she told me you were in that room and you wouldn't come out. We were all right here. She said, I just wanted you to come out and look me in the eye and tell me you love me. I wanted to be able to hug you and tell you how much I love you. She said, even when I saw you, you just walked with your head down and walk right there. She said, I just wanted you to tell me you love me. And she said, you were gone so long. It was so long, I never thought I'd have you back, Uncle. Well, today she has her uncle back. My mother has her son back. And my brother has their brothers have their brother back. It's all due to God. It's due to you and Alcoholics Anonymous. I want to thank you so much, Ali, for asking me to come out. I want to thank you, Teresa. My name's Reggie White. I'm an alcoholic. Thank you guys for listening.